So today, what we are looking at basically covering learning outcome 4, which is in marketing principles and practice. Now, this particular learning outcome, is basically to look at putting into practice what we have done so far in terms of coverage of learning outcome 1, 2, and 3. So in the first one, we understood what is the role of marketing. We went into principles of marketing in learning outcome 2. And then we look at market research and research methods, primary, secondary, tertiary, and why research is important and how does it inform companies selling products and services to consumers to be able to position, target, and segment their customers using various forms of segmentation, psychographic, demographic, behavioral, these kind of segmentations essentially to better position the products and then get into the decision making mindset and push and look at basically, essentially, I would say, when we look at they segmenting the customers, the idea is to try and target consumers in a much more methodic and, structured manner so that they are able to orient their marketing communication techniques in such a way that it follows the ADA model, creates the awareness, it creates the interest, creates a demand, and then obviously pushes the customer to make a decision. So these were things that we looked at primarily for the purposes of understanding learning outcome 1, 2, and 3. Now in 4, what we are looking at is, putting this into a bit of practice. So when I say putting this into a bit of practice, what we are looking at essentially doing in this case is, the first one talks about proposing, strategic objectives to be able to develop, a marketing plan. So here, what we want to be able to do is essentially create a marketing plan for a particular product that we have in mind and go about explaining how we would go about planning some of the marketing activities to bring or essentially take this product to market. The second assessment criteria talks about looking at determining target markets for selected products. That means basically the process of segmentation, looking at how do we shortlist as a company markets for selling our products, and how do we look at targeting consumers. And then the last part of it looks at taking into account factors which could be relevant for the implementation of this marketing plan. That means if we look at say for example creating a plan wherein we will do an event or we will do some social media marketing, or in some cases if the company decides that we'll do a print campaign or a TV campaign, then how are these going to be implemented and how they will measure the success and metrics of it to keep quantifying to ensure that it is helping in achieving those objectives. So when I say those objectives, what I mean by that is no company is going to advertise just for the sake of advertising. Advertising always has, or marketing always has certain background to it in terms of why the company is looking at putting those many dollars, pounds into marketing. So sometimes if it's a new product being introduced, then the company is going to be looking at creating awareness about that product. So the key objective of that marketing campaign, whether it's print, TV, radio, events, hands-on demos, any sort of, let's say, outlet that they use for creating their plan would be to create awareness of their product. Once the awareness of the product is done and they feel that now the consumers are able to recognize the product, they might go into intensifying their marketing campaign by rolling out offers, promotions, and say certain types of schemes. It could be buyback scheme. For example, if the company brings out a new television, a new phone, a phone company brings out a new phone, they would be interested in obviously attracting all sorts of consumers. And they feel that consumers having old version of the phones or TVs would be enticed by trading in. And if they offer, say, £100 off on your old TV or whatever, that would basically push customers to buy their product. And then it could also have, a case wherein the company looks at essentially implementing a plan wherein they are looking at building reputation, loyalty amongst consumers, and that is where they will start maybe an example of offering coupons or discounts which could be going to existing customers, which we normally get to see in high product marketing, high price product marketing. Say for example cars, when they hold the events, dealerships, what they do is they say you trade in your old car, you get £2,000 off, or a dealership contribution of £1,000. You look at some of these premium products which normally companies have to market, and they have a larger or a greater life cycle in terms of start from awareness interest, to demand, to purchase have a longer life cycle, then in those cases, companies have to invest into multiple types of marketing programs, and they then help the company, deal and speak to consumers at different levels of their journey, in their life cycle of purchase, in their journey, and that would allow the plan to be developed and implemented. And obviously, in some cases, if planning is not going as per, if marketing activities are not going as per plan, then the companies have an objective to reorient and obviously readjust the plans, and that would be done in this particular part. So the bits that we are going to be looking into detail when we talk about this using a presentation would be to talk about what could be the strategic objectives of why a company creates a marketing plan. How do they look at target market or consumers? So here we will be looking at demographics and segmentation in particular. And then what could be the, let's say the barriers or factors which could affect or create hurdles for the implementation of, the marketing plan. And that is what we are going to be looking at understanding from a point of view of the last learning outcome. So let's get into a bit more detailing of this learning outcome 4 by looking into going through some of the presentation slides, and they will allow us to discuss this learning outcome in a bit more detail. So this particular presentation that I've got here covers some of the details of assessment criteria 4.1, 2, and 3. Obviously, there are 3 in this particular assessment criteria, learning outcome. So we'll be discussing them in a bit more detail. Now, let's go into a bit of key terminology before I go into the detailing of the assessment criteria. Now, one of the things that we want to refresh is what is segmentation. So in the previous sessions, what I've done is, what I've talked about primarily is the process of segmentation. And when we look at the process of segmentation, what we tend to do in segmentation is basically divide the markets into, divide the consumer, let me put it this way, into 4 different types. And in terms, of segmentation, when we talk in general, if I bring this slide across or a picture across, what it will do is help us explain in terms of and refresh what is segmentation. So when we talk about the process or the definition of segmentation, we say that as a marketeer, what I'm essentially going to do is basically look at dividing the market into different parts. And here, when I talk about segmentation, what I would do is basically, specifically, if I talk market segmentation, then what I'm going to be doing is basically looking at referring to prospective buyers who are going to be buying the goods and services of a particular company. And what I would want to do using segmentation is to put them into certain groups. And these groups that I put them into or do a categorization of them into a group would essentially have some characteristics, things like common needs or preferences, and that would allow me to understand how each segment or each particular group actually behaves when we talk about the process of their purchase cycle. So in general, when we talk about the process of segmentation and how and why companies look at this is quite important, is because the companies are looking at essentially, let's put it this way, putting consumers into certain types of groups, and these groups would have certain or show certain characteristics, and these characteristics would allow the company to understand how the consumer purchases, what are the needs, what are their preferences, what are their wants, what they look at into their taking into account in terms of their consideration set, and all those things would allow the company to better market, position, and essentially sell the product by understanding the consumer behavior and their lifestyle and their personality trait, their values, and this would allow them to sell the products or position the products and services that they want to sell to the consumer more effectively. Now, this segmentation, when we talk about in general, tends to be of 4 different types. So we've discussed this in the previous sessions, and this segmentation tends to be, geographic, demographic, psychographic, and behavioral. Now, each of these segmentations that we talk about have certain characteristics, and the benefits of market segmentation, are quite clear. It's an established fact that all companies, when they start creating a marketing program or a campaign, they would look at first and foremost the process of segmentation. And this allows them to understand what consumers they will want to go across to, what markets they will address, and what are the key things that the product attributes are able to address when they talk about their consumers. So benefits of segmentation are many, but they could be classified as things like it allows the company to create stronger marketing messages. It allows them to target the advertising to a particular consumer. It helps in developing, effective strategies, which could essentially mean that there is a good response rate that they get if the advert creates attraction with the consumer and the messaging of the advert resonates with the consumer. Or, sometimes you see an advert and, maybe assume that you're looking at buying a pair of trousers and you see an advert from Marks and Spencer clothing. And what happens is that the advert actually pushes certain criterias in your mind emotionally to say, okay, this is a good product. And I was in any case looking at buying a pair of trousers. I think this new new advert, which you've seen, actually ticks that box. A lot of ticks, it does go into a lot of ticking of those boxes that you have in mind. Say, for example, you were already looking at purchasing, you were looking at, say, for example, a corduroy trousers, you were looking at buying something for the autumn, and then you were looking at some colors or, certain price points, which essentially this advert is highlighting. And that is essentially looking at the messaging which the company creates, which basically looks at creates that look and feel that, okay, it's right for me, and it attracts customers to be able to purchase. So that is one of the first things that we want to look at essentially when we talk about, companies creating a marketing plan. Now, when we talk about strategic objectives, of planning, or let's look at this way, when we talk about what is positioning, one of the other things that we look at, in key terminology, I think I will put it this way, is that what is positioning when we say positioning in the market, or what do you mean by, essentially positioning? So this is something which I would again want to look at, because this is directly related to the marketing plan that we need to create. So when I talk about positioning can be defined as a bit of a strategic exercise that a company undertakes to find out whether its product or service is going to be, finding a place, or, for example, is able to fulfill a consumer demand or a preference for a consumer demand in the market. So when we talk about positioning, what we are essentially looking at is the company wanting to place their product or their brand within a particular market, which is where they would make sure that there is a need and there is a demand for their product which consumers want. And by placing that product in the market at a specific price point or in amongst a specific product category, what they're aiming to achieve is that they are aiming to ensure that consumers are able to, buy their products. That means the product that they're going to sell or the service that they're going to position is going to fulfill a consumer's demand, or a particular demand for which they see that there is no such product or option available. And when they introduce that product in the market, what you're going to see essentially is that the customer will, flock to it, or essentially, look at purchasing it, because there is no substitute or no other similar product essentially available in the market. So positioning tends to be an important part, because it looks at the aspect of providing company an avenue that would allow it to, let's say, introduce its product, and that introduction of the product that the company does would allow it to then, obviously meet certain types of consumer demand. So if we have to ask, or if you have to respond to what is positioning in marketing refers to the strategic process of creating a distinct image, an identity for a product or a brand in the minds of consumers relative to competition products and brands. And this particular concept, was introduced by Al Ries and Jack Trout in their book called Positioning, which is the Battle of Minds. And this is a key part which, essentially is now very well accepted. And I'll put this across here as well, just as a bit of a reminder. So this was as a concept introduced by Al Rice and Jack Trout, and they introduced this concept called positioning, the battle for your mind. And they wrote this book, and in this book, they created this framework which allows, this positioning framework essentially that we talk about allows essentially companies to use this framework to be able to go and then position some of these products in the minds of consumers. Now, what was this particular framework in terms of, essentially when we talk about positioning, what we look at is there are two concepts that you need to understand. And these two concepts that we talk about, for the purposes of understanding the, how a company would look at positioning this into consumers' mind. When we look at this in detail, what we look at is their framework, which they defined, looks at very closely relating to what is called the STP model. So segment, target, and positioning model in marketing, as we normally would, call it. So this particular model, which obviously then came on and obviously became important. So when I look at this particular model in terms of, let's put this across into a new slide. These are bits which are slightly important because what we are looking at essentially is talking about, how you would essentially look at creating a marketing plan. So when we talk about this STP marketing framework, I have a particular video which I will show you as well to explain this framework. This is an important framework which is considered, essentially when we talk about the process of, marketing. And when we talk about the process of marketing, segmentation, targeting, and positioning are certainly three avenues to which marketers have to first answer or create answers. And this particularly refers to the basic steps that marketers take or marketing managers take, which will use this as a process to identify what are the right consumers, how the consumers are going to be served, and what could be the right messaging which could be given out to the consumers in the form of information that would allow successful targeting to happen. So when we look at this concept of, the positioning, which was introduced by, these two scientists, which are Al Rice and Jack Trout, they essentially, talked about the process, and this led to the creation of many different types of frameworks or models which are used currently, in the creation of what is called marketing campaigns when companies undertake that. So these could be used from a perspective of, when we talk about these marketing campaigns, in terms of, things like they are further highlighted into what is called, different types of positioning. And this positioning also then leads and closely relates to what is called segmentation and targeting. So let me just play a video, which I want to look at showing you here, which is primarily going to discuss, the segmentation, targeting, and positioning part of it, which hopefully should allow, to understand this in a great more detail. So let me just bring that on. And we'll go into that particular detail. So just give me 1 second. There we go.
Welcome once again to our series.
Let's look at this framework.
Frameworks. In this episode, we explore the STP marketing model, a fundamental approach for market segmentation.
So what I will also show you is this particular playlist, which is on our channel on YouTube, has all the key marketing frameworks that I have created videos on, and they are useful in general going to be for you because they will give you an insight into, what these frameworks are and how they can be put to practice in most cases. So if you look at this particular playlist, which says marketing frameworks under the playlist option, and when you click on full playlist, there are a total of, 54 frameworks that I'm creating. And as of now, I've done about 35 videos, which are all key frameworks that you will study in your course when you're doing business and management. So things like SWOT analysis, PESTEL analysis, Potter's framework, ANSOF framework. We look at BCG matrix, 7S McKinsey model, VRIO framework. We look at loads of them, and all of them are essentially going to be, frameworks. ADA model that I talked about a bit earlier, which is awareness, increase in demand, basically awareness, interest, demand, and then decision making. So all these are going to be quite useful for you to study specifically to the content of marketing, but in general, they'll be discussed around, some of the other units as well, which is like business, operating in global context, business environment, and some of the other units that we're going to study. So this is something useful for you to look at, but let's look at focusing on the STP, which is the strategic targeting, segmentation, targeting and positioning framework related to strategic aspects of why a marketing plan needs to take into account this particular framework. So let's start just this video again.
Welcome once again to our series dedicated to indispensable business frameworks. In this episode, we explore the STP marketing model, a fundamental approach for market segmentation and targeting. Developed in the 1950s, the STP model stands for segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Let's examine each of these components and their practical applications. Let's discuss the components of the STP model. The STP model serves as a conceptual framework that guides marketers through the process of market segmentation. The STP model is grounded in the theory of market segmentation, which emerged in the late 1950s. It postulates that markets are heterogeneous and can be divided into segments that can be individually targeted. Let's discuss the model using a real-world application. As a practical example, let's consider Tesla. Tesla segmented the market by focusing on environmentally conscious and tech-savvy consumers. It then targeted this segment with electric cars featuring cutting-edge technology. Finally, Tesla positioned itself as a premium, sustainable brand. That wraps up our exploration of the STP marketing model. Knowing how to segment, target, and position your market can be a game changer for your marketing strategy. In this installment, we've dissected the STP marketing model, giving you a theoretical backdrop as well as a real-world example with Tesla. This model remains a cornerstone in the realm of marketing. Stay tuned as we delve.
As you can see, basically this particular, framework talks about why companies need to look at identifying the consumer, the market, and how they would go about doing the messaging to that consumer, which remains very important. Now, in terms of the, the bit which we talk about in terms of Al Ries and Jack Trout's positioning model, what we're looking at is that they kind of propose that positioning is not to do anything about the product. It is about positioning the benefits and the attributes of the product in the minds of the consumer. And if you position the benefits of what the product the consumer purchases is able to do in the minds of the consumer, then you would generally see the consumer, at some stage would look at, making that purchase of the product. So positioning is all about what they talked about as a concept was that they talked about that it's all about understanding the reality in terms of how consumers think and what goes through the consumer's mind when they are looking and making a purchase for a particular product. And if you can look at manipulating or obviously looking at getting into and creating connections with how the consumer is thinking and what the consumer is thinking, that allows the companies to successfully, sell products or services to a particular target consumer. And when we talk about the concept or a phrase that you hear, perception is reality. So this was something which was brought forward by them, in the sense that what they said is that if the consumers perceive that this product is good in quality, like Sony televisions, although there are lots of other brands which have caught up with that particular quality aspect of it. But when we look at the late 80s, Sony or Japanese consumer electronics were seen as the best in terms of their quality and service when people bought these products. Their positioning, which the company created at that point in time for washing machines, microwaves, any sort of kitchen appliance or electronic appliance, including televisions, Walkman, the cassette player that we had, iconic cassette player, which was replaced, and lost its relevance after the introduction of the iPods by Apple, and MP3 players. You look at the positioning of VCR or video cassette recorder. These were products which were all initially created by Japanese, electronic giants, Sony, Matsushita, Fujitsu. And their reputation that they had created in the minds of consumers was that these products were long lasting. They were quality products. Once you buy them, they will serve you for years and years to come. And that perception which the company created essentially helped the Japanese consumer giants sell billions of these products worldwide. And till date, today, when we talk about buying a Sony product, or whether it's a camera, camcorder, any sort of a Sony product like a television, music player, we still have that perception in the mind, because this is the area where marketing has done its bits, and that is what done its job, in the sense that is what Jack Rice, Al Rice and Jack Trout actually predicted, that perception is reality. So if you're able to position it in the minds of consumers, then everything else becomes irrelevant. Even if it is a false perception, it becomes the truth. That is how consumers take it. And it is all about understanding how do we understand consumers' psychology, and then look at putting the messaging in place, which then allows us to better segment, better target, and better position the products in the minds of consumers. And the messaging then resonates and hits the consumer's perception and thinking, and thereby allowing the consumers to make that purchase as far as or prefer a particular brand for the purchase of that particular product. So when we do talk about these in particular, we are going to be looking at essentially some of these concepts of what is positioning, what is segmentation, and what is the idea behind targeting. So these three things essentially are going to be let's say the foundation of how a marketing plan essentially is created. So when I talk about what is targeting, this is the third cog in the wheel. So when we talk about targeting, what we are looking at essentially is this particular third cog, which is basically looking at discussing about that why targeting is important and how it can inform the creation of a well thought of and a structured marketing plan. So targeting, when we talk about in general, is a fundamental concept in marketing, and any marketer would know that it involves in the selection of specific groups of audience to focus the marketing campaign and the strategy which the company has drawn. And in doing so, by taking this approach, the businesses which are very clear that they have a target segment in mind, a group of people in mind to which they are going to be sending this communication across, seldom see any failures. That means they are more going to be successful because they have done thorough research and study into what their consumers want, what are their preferences, and why they are interested in their products or services. So targeting aims to maximize efficiency and effectiveness of any marketing campaign by delivering messages and promotions to those who are most likely to respond positively. So this particular bit in terms of targeting is the most important aspect when we are looking at designing, I would say, marketing or creating marketing campaigns. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. And in general, when we look at the process of, targeting, you would generally see that there are, three things which interplay with each other. And these three things that we talk about when we look at interplay with each other, one is that we look at this particular the STP framework, which I had shown. And if you look at, if I bring this across just as an example, what you're going to see is that segmentation, targeting, and positioning, they go hand in hand. So first, the company needs to understand segmentation, then it will look at target segment, and then it will look at positioning the advert or the campaigns in such a way which are going to create an effect, or at least, connect with the consumer from a point of view of, the messaging. And that is why this tends to be very, very important. Now, when we talk about one other thing which I'll throw into the mix is, what is a target market? The reason I want to put this across is because it will make it very, hopefully clinically clear for us to be able to develop a plan. Now, when we talk about a target market, what we are essentially talking about is, all these three things put into a particular, let's say, action. So when I talk about, segmentation, targeting, and positioning, the target market, or the, the market that I'm going to go across to. So when I say target market, UK could be a target market. When I talk about a target market, and I need to be very specific, in the target market in the UK, I'll be going across to a certain type of consumers based on their segmentation. And that could be consumers which are in the middle income group, people who are working, earning over 35,000. They are in the age group of 25 to 45. They have a family, they have a full-time job, and they are at least a degree holder, or they are graduates in terms of their academic background. Now, this is demographic segmentation. So when I know that I need to go across and target these kind of consumers which have these characteristics, then I would also be able to understand from the study of the consumer attributes that these consumers have these kind of preferences. And that is where market research comes in and relates to the learning outcome 2 that we have covered, which is the why do we need to understand marketing methods or research methods in a point of view of bringing that information in the key points of the competitor reports in and analysis to understand how do we differentiate our products and our messaging with regards to some of the others in the market. So a target market could be a specific market segment that you're looking at targeting as a company, which focuses or consists of certain target groups, which could be individuals, household, or organizations, and they are being targeted because you want to sell specific products or provide them specific offers, and they are going to fall within the budget and their needs and preferences or constraints that they have in mind when they want to look at buying those products and services. It is going to be easier if we have a target market in mind, because this will allow us to develop marketing campaigns which are going to go across to those consumers. They would be the messaging that the advertising company, or the advertising department essentially creates would result in helping to increase sales, or increase the awareness of the product, which could lead to some sort of a purchase in the future. And when we look at these strategies, we are looking at using three things all the time: segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Within segmentation, we are going to be looking at psychographic, demographic, behavioral, and geographic segmentations. When we talk about targeting, we are going to be looking at targeting, which is basically focused on understanding what the company is selling, how the company will go to market, and what kind of benefits will it provide to consumers when it talks about selling its products. So these would be the target market in terms of segmentation. And then the positioning is going to be the messaging which the company creates to identify the product, the right price, and understand the competition and the market dynamics before it starts to roll out a marketing campaign. Is that okay? Is that understood? Any questions on this so far?
Yeah, it's understood, sir. No question.
Okay, good stuff. So let's go across into some of the assessment criteria now and discuss, some of the detailing in terms of the slides. Now, the first one talks about proposing, what are the strategic objectives that the company would look at in terms of, creating a marketing plan. What are these objectives going to be? So I've got a particular, picture here, which talks about looks at a scenario when a marketing manager is sitting and he or she is actually thinking of certain questions which are coming up as bubbles that I've created. So it talks about questions which I would ask when I'm creating a marketing plan. So for example, what is the current business situation? Is the business doing good? Do we have enough profits? These are some of the things which it will get as answers, which will come from the management, and the management would inform what kind of marketing budget you have, what kind of campaign you need to run so that it helps in increasing sales, maybe increasing market share, increasing the brand reputation of the company, or it is looking at building loyalty from existing customers. So there will be some overarching qualitative objectives which will come from the management. Now, when you create a marketing plan, you look at costs, time frame, duration, and you look at what is going to be the return on investment. Then you would also think about target markets, positioning, and segmentation. What could be the goals? Now, the marketing managers normally get some sort of objectives and goals, which are going to be related to either the management or getting it from, let's say, the chief marketing officer to understand what are the reasons why the company would want to advertise, whether it's looking at increasing sales, increasing turnover, profitability, retaining customers, creating loyalty, generating awareness for a newly launched product, or is it going to be looking at, increasing its customer base, or, go across and take on competition head on by introducing a similar or a substitute product. There could be very many objectives, but any such campaign which is drawn up normally would have some basic goals against which at some stage the company would look at doing measurements once the campaign has been rolled out or the strategic marketing plan has been rolled out, because you want to look at the ROI, return on investment. You want to see whether it has made any effect and has it contributed or helped in achieving those aims or objectives or not. And sometimes when you do marketing, you would also look at different forms of marketing, tactical marketing. You would look at, guerrilla marketing. You would look at, for example, brand marketing. You would look at essentially sales and advertising, which is the product is very well established. There's a lot of demand in the market. All you have to do is just introduce promotions or, various type of actionable points, which could push the customers to come in and buy, or, come for shopping and buy more. So this is what tends to happen when we look at sales which come on during Easter. You talk about Christmas sale, Boxing sale. Do you think these companies do not have enough brand and reputation in the market? They do, but what they still have to do is create that, artificial, let's say, ripple, which allows the consumers to come in and shop into the, into their outlets in the high street to say, okay, there is a sale, Black Friday sale, for example. These kind of events actually then give the consumers a perception of that there is a special event happening, there is a special discount available, and that is what pushes the customers to essentially, buy. So when we look at strategic objectives, there can be many, many different types of strategic objectives which a company might have for the process of, essentially, let's say, going to market or creating a marketing plan. Now, some of these objectives can be when a company is launching new product. Apple, for example, has launched the new iPhone 15. So this is an example that they would need to popularize the product, talk about its benefits, its features, why is it different from the iPhone 14, how is it different, and what are the new features it has that it's had introduced which are not available with any other competitor's product. So what the company would need to do is basically talk about new product, creating awareness and generating sales and interest for the new product, and that could be one of the reasons why the company would need to look at marketing campaigns. To enter a new market, sometimes you would see that companies need to look at entering a new market because its sales are stagnating or it is now reaching to most of the consumer segment within a particular geography. So what the companies then look at is for the next phase of their expansion, they will look at entering newer markets. The newer markets could have lots of meanings. One could be geographically you are entering into a new market. That means Tesco, for example, operates in 12 different countries in Europe and in the UK. But if it looks at expanding into other developing countries like India, China, it might need to enter that market. So that's entering a new market. Entering the new market could also mean that it is maybe, if I look at Unilever, they are a very big, fast-moving consumer goods brand. They have If I look at just soaps as a category, there are 40 different types of soaps that the company sells. And within each of their soap category, the category which is the soaps, within that, each of the product itself is so big in terms of revenue that they have their own marketing teams and own organizations to be able to run them. So if I talk about Lux, Dove, Rexona, we talk about Lifebuoy, we talk about a lot of these different brands of products. They are all owned by Unilever, but within Unilever, this is a strategic business unit which is like soaps. And within the soaps, these are all different individual products, and each product has a revenue in excess of 2 to 3 billion pounds every year. So they are companies within themselves, and sometimes you call them as SPUs, strategic business units. So they are so important for generating revenue for the company that it itself has its own marketing team, sales team, research team, administrative team, and they run like a full organization within the bigger organization. So when they have to enter a new market, that would mean geographically, but if they introduce a new type of soap, for example, then they are introduced, or instead of soap, they are introducing now a shower gel. So they are entering a new market, which is a newer market in terms of the category, but essentially it's a new product and a new market because they're introducing shower gels for the first time as an example. And that could be an example of also a newer market that they're trying to tap into. They see competition selling shower gels, which have become important because it's easy to hang the shower gel next to the shower, and you don't need to have a dispenser for the soap and other things. And that is a segment they don't have products in, for example. So they are looking at getting into that particular segment or market, and that could be by introduction of a new product category or a new product within a particular category, and that could also be termed as new market. Expand market share. So companies which have established products, year on year, their marketing departments, when they spend money on budgets, on campaigns, their main aim is to look at increasing market share. That means gaining more consumers, increasing market share against competition. So if Apple and Samsung have to be looked at, for example, in terms of how much of the smartphone market they have. So if I look at the target, market share, of Apple and Samsung in the smartphone market, they would typically be, the two biggest players as far as the research is concerned, and their products are concerned. So when I look at that, the marketing managers or people essentially working within their departments, would be looking at carrying a specific target of ensuring that they are able to increase the market share of Apple from 18% to say 21% this year by the introduction of new product like iPhone 15. They might have a target that sometimes you would see that companies would give targets to consumers to say that let's look at increasing market share this year by spending that much money as far as the global shipments are concerned. And that would be a specific target why a company would also introduce and have a particular marketing plan. Now, to increase sales, this is one of the very clear goals which companies have. Every year they're looking at increasing turnover, profitability, and that could only happen if they increase sales. So when we look at one of the strategic goals or plans for the company, one of the objectives is to increase sales, increase profit. And sometimes when companies are very well established and they have a let's say the purchase cycle is quite long because it's a very premium product, I think companies in those cases then look at spending money in terms of marketing campaigns to look at highlighting the benefits of associating with that brand, talking about the quality, the relevance of that particular brand. So if I look at cars like Ferrari, Lamborghini, you look at Bentley, you look at Rolls-Royce, they sell to limited number of customers in the year. So Ferrari probably sells about 25,000 cars a year. They spend a lot of money highlighting in their campaigns, things about the reliability of the product and, the pedigree of where it started and why they're the fastest cars, they're more comfortable, why they are the most comfortable cars. If we talk about Rolls-Royces or Bentleys, they are looking at spending money on enhancing the reputation of their brand. And they know that they have to get into the high net worth individual or high net worth individual customers which are millionaires or billionaires, and those are the people who are essentially going to be looking at, buying their products. So here, to enhance reputation, they would be looking at spending money in terms of, spending money on, marketing plans or marketing campaigns. Now, identification of objectives tend to be following a particular, pattern in all companies and in all marketing departments. You again start with the process of defining objectives and markets and which markets you want to go to. Then you would look at basically targeting those markets. And then before targeting, you would understand who are the key consumers in that market that have the product, have the money to be able to buy your product and service. And then when they buy the product, how you deliver value. And then finally, in some cases, you would be looking at also demonstrating how the value has been delivered. And this would allow more and more consumers to essentially come to your brand to be able to buy those products. So identifying these strategic objectives would be done by looking at considering these 4 steps. And the whole idea where the company is actually looking at driving this particular marketing plan is to essentially look at growing the company and growing the let's say the organization in terms of its turnover, and thereby increasing sales and profitability. Now, when we go into some of the key aspects of the strategic objectives, we need to also look at that companies will be looking at mapping the market, segmenting, and understanding consumer needs. So here is where we will look at companies also getting into what is called the SWOT analysis. So they would look at their strengths and weaknesses, what are the opportunities that they have to put their product in front of the customers. And that is where you get to see that they do events, they do, sometimes when you go to the high street and you're buying a perfume, what tends to happen is you buy 1 or 2 perfume bottles, and what the sales representative would also do is give you a few testers for free. And what they're trying to do is, although they know that you're buying their product, but what they're trying to do is maybe give you samples or testers of newer products that they're introducing, maybe a shower gel, maybe a hand cream, or maybe a exfoliating cream, things like that, which is where they want to increase the demand, or try and address the need by creating a demand by giving you these testers and samples to be able to try out, and thereby hoping that existing customers, because they're buying our products, and when they try out these testers and samplers, it will essentially create the connect, which is to say that that is also useful and I need to try this out, and that would essentially allow them to then come back and buy those products, or lead into what is called repeat purchases. So these 3 bits that we discuss about segmentation, targeting, and positioning are essentially aspects which companies look at primarily for the purposes of driving strategic objectives for essentially a marketing plan. So a marketing plan, you would need to create, essentially would look at addressing objectives like the companies. If I go and look at, we take an example of the iPhone 15, which is a new product launch which has happened. So if I have to look at creating a marketing plan for iPhone 15, what I would do is basically talk about why I would essentially need a marketing plan, because this is a new product which is being launched, and obviously in order to drive sales for this product, the marketing department would need to support sales, business development, account management, and various teams across different countries where the product will be introduced in a stepwise fashion. But in order to drive sale and demand for this product, the marketing campaigns would need to be rolled out, and they would be a combination of, say, for example, things which are related to let's say creating awareness, leading to trial of the product, display of the product, consumers coming into the stores to look and feel and understand and see what are the differences in advancements and differences in terms of iPhone 15 to a previous product. And then the company would look at, the department would look at, in this case, the company, obviously the marketing department would essentially look at creating options wherein it could attract consumers who have purchased and have had a previous version of the product to come in and trade their old product, give some sort of an offer on this, and that would start driving the sale or the interaction with the consumers, for the purposes of, creating the sales and demand for the new product. So here, it would basically mean that the department would need to consider lots of things, which is existing customers, availability of the product, key features, what are the things that it is going to use essentially to differentiate itself from some of the other players in the market which have introduced similar products maybe a couple of weeks earlier, or are looking at introducing similar products a couple of weeks down the line. And that is where the company would be looking at going into understanding what would be the key aspects of the marketing strategy or the plan that the company would create for selling the new product. And this plan, once it is created, say for example, from what I understand and from what I know from previous launches, normally the product launch is supported by $1 billion in terms of marketing spend by the company to create awareness and demand for the new version of the phone that they introduce. Now, this particular thing we normally get to see being utilized, and the spend actually is seen across in different formats. One is Apple would aggressively do advertising online and by hoardings or billboards in many different countries in which this product is going to be introduced. So in most cities where you have Apple stores, you would generally see large hoardings or billboards in prominent positions which will advertise and talk about the benefits of the new phone and what are the key things that the phone is bringing. For example, this phone they've introduced has titanium casing, which is the hardest metal known on earth. And this phone, they are saying, is more durable and it's more, let's say, it's better than some of their other phones because this has titanium casing, which protects the phone and, gives it a very robust modular structure. Now, this is an advert campaign which you are getting to see rolled out on TV and this message in billboards. And in certain countries, it has also done print advertising, full page print advertising to create awareness and demand for this product. It will also be looking at holding events in Apple stores where it will promote the usage and obviously the penetration of this product amongst different consumers which are coming into its stores. So they'll be asking you, because there will be a lot of them in display, customers will be having a look and feel, touch, and they will try out the new phone, and this would allow experience of using the phone firsthand, allow them to make a decision that whether this is a phone that they want to buy. There could be customers coming in to buy older phones, replacement of the older phone, trade-ins of the old phone, or in some cases, customers switching from a competitor like Samsung or Oppo or some of the other brands and moving to iPhone. They would be interested because they have seen something which catches their attention and obviously looks at, the aspect of, let's say, why this phone is better. So when we look at some of these things, what we are going to be looking at is creating a bit of a marketing plan, which will essentially be, looking at how do we, look at launching this particular product into the market. Now, if I show you, say, for example, how this plan is to be created, just as an example, I'm going to show you a PowerPoint slide. And this PowerPoint slide would essentially talk about a marketing plan for iPhone 15. So I'll have a bit of an introduction. I'll have some objectives of what the plan is going to do. What is the target market? I'll look at a bit of SWOT analysis for my consumers in terms of my product. What are the unique features? What are the unique attributes of iPhone 15? And I'll consider the marketing mix. Then I'll look at budget and timeline, and I'll look at monitoring and evaluation. Now, if I look at what is the overarching goal, the overarching goal of the iPhone 15 is marketing plan is to basically launch the iPhone 15 in the market and then look at pushing consumers or, letting consumers know that this is the newest product. And what you would need to do is basically look at coming to the stores and look at buying this product. Now, what the company is looking at doing is it has a current market share of 14% in the smartphone market. With the launch of the new product, I've just created this myself. So they have we will look at increasing the market share by 10%. We'll also look at increasing and taking our customer satisfaction to 95%. And what the company looks at generating is that it wants to generate 500 million pounds worth of revenue in the first quarter. So the product was launched last month on the 7th of September. I think it started becoming available from the 21st. So in September, October, November, December, leading up to Christmas, the company is looking at generating $500 million dollars or pounds in terms of revenue from sales of this particular product. Now, what is the target market? It is going to target consumers which are between the age group of 18 to 35. They are professionals. They want a phone which is fast. It allows them to increase efficiency and productivity. And they are existing customers of Apple predominantly because it's looking at the first quarter plan, wherein it will expect most of the sales to come from existing existing Apple customers which are loyal to its brand. Now, what are the various kind of things that it will advertise on when it talks about the plan? It is going to talk about, by doing this SWOT analysis, it's talk about the strengths of the Apple brand, the newer product. What it will do is highlight some of the weaknesses which are there in other brands, things like low battery, or battery does not last a full day. It'll talk about high price points, or quality of the product, and they would exploit some of the weaknesses and put them on as strengths in the marketing plan. They look at opportunities because it's a 5G product. There are certain markets in which 5G is available, 18 or 19 countries, and that would be the first set of market launch, the countries which will include, because that product is allowed, will be able to make use of the latest technology of 5G, and that is where this will be more useful. And then it'll look at the threats of downturn or any sort of recession, or issues related to compliance regulation. Like in China, the Chinese Communist Party has issued a memorandum last month to say that no Chinese official in the government or related to the government would be allowed to carry an iPhone. Then they've been given only a month's notice to change from iPhone to a Huawei or one of the Chinese brand. Now, this is a threat to the iPhone sales and its existence in China, because let's face it, there are thousands and thousands, if not millions, of employees within the government department in China. And if they have to do away with their iPhone because of security reasons, which the Chinese government is presenting, they would be looking at replacing their phones with alternate Android / Chinese brand phone, which would mean that Apple's sales in China might not happen. And that's a threat. So Apple is already concentrating on pushing sales in the Indian market because they feel that there are no such restrictions, and it has the similar population set and the requirements as far as between China and India is concerned. So it is moving some of its manufacturing facilities and, key part of marketing spend to India market as against China, because they see this as a bit of a restriction. So this SWOT analysis, which will be done, would allow the marketing department to reorient their marketing plan to ensure that they're investing in places where they can expect sales to happen and revenues to increase. Then they'll talk about marketing mix in terms of how it will position the product, pricing, promotion, and, in general, how the product is going to be introduced, from which channels they will promote the product. That is going to be done in the marketing plan. Now, I have looked at a budget that, because obviously these are secrets, we don't know how much they are spending, but I've looked at, say, for example, in the first quarter, they might spend 50 million, and this would be then revisited by the marketing department to see whether the campaign has resulted in achieving the objectives. If not, they will readjust, they will do audits, and obviously they will stop or change the campaign, so that at some stage, this would essentially be, useful for the company to increase the sale of its newer product in the market. And this would be an example of how I would say you would need to look at creating a bit of a marketing plan in the first part of the assessment criteria. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's look at
okay.
the second assessment criteria quickly. This is to look at what is the target market for the selected product. Now, when we talk about target market, we've gone into a bit of detail when we discuss the STP model. And target market is all about analyzing from a marketing department's point of view, what are the key segmentations it will look at: demographic, behavioral, geographic, or psychographic, and then finally arrive at the target consumer, or the customer that it's going to send and create most of the campaigns for. So generally, you would see this would involve the STP model. And once the customer has been identified in the target market, whether it's going to be, say, for example, demographic, segmentation, it will follow. Once they've identified that, what they are going to do is divide the market using the key segments of the consumer group it wants to go to, and then conduct a more detailed market research. And that market research will be looking at collecting information about the type of consumers, their needs and preferences and wants. And then what they will do is basically start putting together a messaging or a campaign in place. So assuming if the company goes with demographics, they look at age group, identifying the age group, they identify the gender, common job titles, people who have that particular economic, status because of their job. And then they will look at some of the psychographic factors, things like what are they going to look at, whether they are loyal customers, whether they are customers which are able to switch brands easily if an offer comes. Sometimes what happens is I'm an iPhone customer and I've used all different forms of iPhone over the years since 2007. Now, even if Samsung comes into me and says that, okay, I'll give you a Samsung Galaxy or Samsung flip phone, absolutely free in exchange for your phone, I might not still shift to Samsung because I know that there are fundamental differences in the two platforms. One is the iOS, the other is Android. And that is where the companies then look at studying my psychographic to understand whether I'm a loyal customer, whether it is going to be important for them to spend money on me to be able to switch, and whether that money being spent could be utilized elsewhere, or whether it will still lead to final switching or not. And that is what the companies would be looking at when they look at, going into details of the different types of segmentation and challenges. A company might need to entice. Sometimes you see that on Amazon, when you buy products, Amazon has a buy to try and then buy kind of a policy. So in some products like shoes and other brands, they have started to slowly and gradually accept that Skechers, for example, allows you to try the product for 7 days before you make a payment to Amazon. Because if they know that the size is not right, or if you're not feeling comfortable wearing those shoes, or if it doesn't meet the expectation criteria of why you bought those as walking shoes or running shoes, then in some cases it can damage the reputation of the company, because customers say, okay, the product is not good. It advertises this, but the features are not there, or this is incorrect or not true. Then in those cases, companies get into a strategy of try before you buy or pay for the product. And those tend to be some of the challenges which companies have to sometimes look at, because what will happen is customers will buy the product, try it for buying first, and then what they will do is after 4 days, 5 days, they decide they don't like it, they have to return it. Once they return it, the company spends money on returning courier charges. When the product comes back, it can't be resold as a new product, it can't be refurbished, it has to be done away with. And in those cases, what you'll generally see, these are challenges which companies can face if they come out and take up these innovative schemes for consumers to be able to sell their products. So sometimes companies would look at preferred channels, campaigns, and these would be very specific unless the company is very confident that the product would be a hit product, and that would not have a return, or the return rate is going to be a certain percentage of the overall sales, which is where it will be able to manage it from its profitability. Then it will allow the company to take that challenge and that particular strategy forward, because they know that, for example, the other channels through which they sell are not providing or growing as much as they would have expected. So they would then be looking at different channels through which they will look at coming out with these programs. And this is what you need to discuss in this particular assessment criteria, which talks about understanding how companies would define the target market for a selected product or a service. So we have to take a specific example to discuss this particular assessment criteria, and that, when done, would allow you to cover this particular task. So I have taken an example of Airbnb, wherein I've used market segmentation and target market to say that why this model actually became important, because the company, when it came out with this unique concept that you could rent out your property certain times of the year and gain rental income in return, for not staying or booking expensive hotels in places, became unique and created a lot of traction with consumers. As a result, Airbnb has now become an established company, and what it has done is this particular model of rental accommodation has become quite acceptable as a strategy, And there, that is where the company has actually gone, when it started way back, a couple of years back in San Francisco in 2008, when this concept was introduced, that customers could actually buy and rent, not buy, but essentially rent a property by going onto their website. And this would allow them to save a lot of money on rental income by not booking expensive hotels when they travel for purposes of vacation or tourism. Became a hit with the consumers. So how do they go across to consumers in terms of targeting what was the product and how this product created traction with consumers can be taken up as an example to cover this assessment criteria. Is that okay? Now, looking at the last assessment criteria, which talks about considering factors which will be relevant for implementation of a marketing plan and stuff. So last assessment criteria, looking at implementation of marketing plan. So here, when we talk about the implementation of marketing plan, what we are looking at is considering the factors that are going to be impediment. That means can cause hurdles or problems for the implementation of marketing plan. So these could be, for example, competition, reacting to some of your advertisement and campaigns that you do, and they would come out with a counter campaign to basically, disrupt your objectives of, getting successful messaging across to consumers. It could also mean that economic circumstances are not, that conducive. For example, the Israeli-Palestine war as of now, which is happening, is not creating conducive circumstances. And in general, lots of, things are on hold, or can, if the situation deteriorates, it can affect economic conditions across the globe. And that is where you would see sometimes economic performance or economic climate in general can also play an important part in terms of how companies' marketing plan is actually panning out. You could also look at compliance. So, for example, if the marketing campaign has been introduced and it does not conform to the advertising, agency's guideline, the ASA guidelines in the UK. So in most countries, you would generally see there are, advertising standards agency or certain type of organizations which also look at, vetting the adverts. Now, and this is something which is of common knowledge, that sometimes when certain ads are aired on the TV, consumers end up complaining to ASA, which is the Advertising Standards Agency in the UK, to say this ad is misleading, or this ad, is basically not relevant, and it's talking about certain benefits which probably are misleading or not possible. And when the consumers complain, the ASA as an agency looks into these adverts, and then, obviously either looks at asking the company to withdraw the advert, or in some cases, it basically tells the company to modify it, or it will be fined if the advert is having a misleading message. So in some cases, when you look at this as an example, what you generally see is that when we talk about the relevance of implementing the marketing campaign, you generally see that these factors can actually, be taken into account for the purposes of, ensuring that they do not pose challenges or essentially hurdles for the purposes of, implementing that marketing plan. Now, when we look at making sure it is meeting the compliance, meeting the standards set by the agencies or key organizations within, the market, what we can then essentially end up doing is we clearly know that this is going to be useful and it will hopefully have an intended impact on the consumer. Now, once this plan has been created, you look at budgeting, you look at staffing, and certain key criteria of regulation, for example, business objectives, economic climate, and competition has been taken into account. What we can then go into is start looking into the key aspects of how this implementation of the plan is going to be done. Now, in most cases, if it's a small business, most of it might be rolled out within the company. You might not have a marketing agency, but depending on the size and scale of business, most businesses which have some sort of an advertising outlay or a plan that they put out, they normally would use some sort of an agency. Now, even if this means that if it's a small business and they do adverts using Google advertising on Google, they would still need an agency to create those adverts or implement those adverts and the marketing plan. They might be also looking at taking help of a printer, which will create some flyers or leaflets, like we have takeaways and restaurants which do a lot of their menu printing and flyer printing, but they are essentially doing marketing, and this is a form of catalog marketing or tactical marketing that they do when they send these insertions to the door drops or essentially into consumers' home, and they are essentially doing marketing. So here we might say that, okay, they have a plan, but the plan might not have an element of a marketing agency, although the printer would be printing and creating some sort of a flyer for them, but it's all dovetailed into one particular outlet, which is basically doing all this for them. But if I break it down into various steps, the restaurant, if it opens up, they are planning a new restaurant opening, and what you would generally see is they would look at an opening date. They would come out with some sort of an offer on that day for the first week, for the first month. If you are a family of 4, you only pay for 3, or there is unlimited serving, or unlimited quantity of food that you can have during such times. There could be promotional offers that you create, and these are all bits of the elements of marketing plan. So for example, let's understand if a new Costa cafe is being opened up, and the company looks at giving this as a franchise, and the franchisee then looks at coming up with a plan. Now you're in a particular location in, say, South London on a high street. What the high street the shop is going to open on 1st of November. So what the company would look at, and the team that is going to drive that as a franchise would look at is, okay, let's look at a couple of things. Let's print out some coupons and cards. So if you come in and have coffee 5 times, the 6th coffee is on us. That could be one of the promotion campaigns they'll put into place. Second would be they will create some sort of happy meal or happy time, wherein if you buy something worth over £10, you get a muffin free or a cookie free. There might be an offer which they would say, and create some of these offers which would then be put into practice or play within the store in the first month. And they would be thinking about also doing, say, for example, door drops or some sort of a, let's say, a flyer drop into some nearby surrounding area to say that on Saturdays you could utilize the outlet and have a birthday party or a birthday celebration, and there's a corner which has been created. So these are all things and elements that they would be thinking about, which are going to be a part and parcel of the marketing plan. Now, at some stage, they will need to monitor it, whether it's working, whether it's not working. They will need to put a timeline to it. They will need to put some budget to it. They will need to look at putting some measurable parameters into place to say, okay, in the first month, the outlet is looking at booking a revenue of, say, 100,000 pounds worth of sales. Now, in order to drive that 100,000 pound worth of sale, when it's happening with the sale of coffee and some of the, let's say, other associated products which consumers buy and have along with the coffee, is it going as planned or not? So there would be a review done on the 10th, there would be a review done on the 20th, and then the marketing plan which has been put into place would also be looked at measuring, because in 10 days, how has the marketing plan impacted? Has it increased the footfalls into the store? Has it brought in repeat customers? Costa might also look at sending a text messaging campaign to consumers which are Costa customers. They have a Costa loyalty card, and they are based in the area wherein the shop has been, or this particular new outlet has been opened. So they will look at, essentially doing a messaging campaign, and they would see how many of such customers come across. And at the till, the manager might say, okay, ask the customers, have you come to the outlet for the first time? Do you have a Costa, card? And do you regularly be in this area? So these are conversations which the guys at the till would be asked to have in order to know if the customers coming into the store or the Costa shop are regular customers, new customers, or existing customers who are visiting that particular area. And all that would be looking at, implementing some parts of the marketing aspects of the plan, and thereby looking at building accountability into ensuring whether the plan is working or not working. Now, if by 20th the sales have not reached, for example, 50,000 or 60,000 mark, then it would mean that the marketing plan would need to be adjusted. That means at some stage, what they will need to do in the plan would be to look at other options of how they would advertise or how they would augment this particular plan. And that could be looking at things like For example, understanding what are the factors which are influencing customers to come into the store or, to buy a copy. Have they considered all the essentials of the 5 P's of marketing or 6 P's of marketing: price, place, product, promotion, physical evidence, and people? Are the people in the outlet being friendly and, they are approaching and addressing the customer's demand? You'd be looking at internal factors, which could be factors within the store. You could be looking at external factors and competition, which is in and around that area, and study whether it is affecting those, whether those factors in terms of offers from the competitors in that area is affecting the sales in the outlet or the number of customers coming in. And you would also then generally look into segmentation, targeting, and positioning messaging that is being rolled out with the campaign to see if the campaign is having an effect. Now, if it is having an effect, in some cases, sometimes you have to increase the budget of marketing by looking at also building on to, say, SMS or text messaging that you want to do to existing Costa customers, which will come from the head office, and you have that data available because of the loyalty card, and they know that in this particular area, these many customers are there. So the head office might come in and rescue and say, okay, we'll do a text-based campaign to announce that there's a new store which has opened up, and that would help drive, say, more traffic to the new store. And in general, what you're looking at is considering several elements that you have to take into account to develop your marketing strategy, and then look at segmentation, and then finally go into detailing of understanding what would be, the key bits which are working in the plan, and then readapt and change it to basically look at making sure that the plan essentially is meeting the requirement and helping, in the increase of sales or footfalls into the new opened Costa Cafe. And that would be looking at addressing the challenges that you could face in terms of implementation of the plan. And that is what is required to be covered in this particular assessment criteria 4.3. Is that okay? Any questions on this so far?
No questions, sir.
Okay, good stuff. So what we're going to do is I'm going to end this session here, and I'll see you on Monday to discuss the assignment brief. What I'm going to do is put 2 particular handouts, onto Moodle along with this revised presentation and the recording. One would be putting in a handout on STP, which is primarily segmentation, target, and positioning. And second would be an example of the marketing plan, which I've shown, so that you are able to understand when we do the assignment, that how a marketing plan would need to be produced, for the purposes of understanding and, detailing out this particular learning outcome.
Okay, for this Monday, what time is it start?
Monday, this time would remain the same, which is the previous time. I think Monday's time is 11 a.m.
11.
Yeah, it's 11 a.m. Monday's time, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No worries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for attending, and I will see you on Monday.